And with that, I am happy to answer or dodge any question you like. Yes, ma'am.
Senator, you say let's take this country back. Mm-hmm. This is town meeting month in New Hampshire. And across the state, in town meetings, people are speaking out, and they're saying they want big money out of politics. They're passing resolutions right now. So my question is, if elected president, what would you do to stop corporations and billionaires from influencing public policy that often contradicts the interests of regular people like those of us here? Like Soros.
Well, listen, that's a very good question. The question was, what can we do to stop big money in politics? And let me talk both principle and practicality. Let's start with principle. I think when it comes to campaign finance reform, it's one of the most misunderstood issues in terms of the debate. I am, first and foremost, a constitutionalist. I believe in the Constitution and I believe in the Bill of Rights. We saw last year, you probably didn't see it because it wasn't covered in the local media, but Senate Democrats introduced and voted on an amendment to repeal the free speech protections of the First Amendment. Every single Senate Democrat voted to repeal the free speech protections of the First Amendment. Listen, I believe in free speech in the First Amendment, which means that I believe everyone here has a right to speak out on politics as effectively as possible. To speak out and make your views known, whether that is standing on a street corner on a soapbox, whether that is printing a yard sign, whether that is spending money to run a radio ad or a TV ad, effectively communicating. And what happens on these issues is inevitably the people pushing to limit free speech are incumbent politicians in Washington. And no one should be surprised that when incumbent politicians in Washington pass regulations on spending money in politics, the people who are benefited are incumbent politicians in Washington. So in the Senate, I introduced legislation that I called the Super PAC Elimination Act of 2014. What it did was very simple. It eliminated contribution limits from individuals to any candidate. And then it required immediate disclosure within 24 hours. As a practical matter, if we did that, super PACs would go away. Right now, the system is crazy. Look, the system is designed so that nobody can beat an incumbent politician. You look at campaign finance reform, it's sold to people, let's lower limits, let's make it harder and harder to raise money. What happens is a challenger can't raise money. You look under the federal limits, let's take a state like the state of Texas. When I began running in Texas, Texas has 26 million people. It is an expensive state. The federal limits make it practically impossible for someone who is not an incumbent politician or who is not a multimillionaire to run. What we ought to be doing instead is empowering every citizen to speak up. And the way you do that is, number one, you require disclosure so we can know who's contributing what to whom. But number two, you stop trying to muzzle individual citizens from speaking out. Listen, in the Senate race, when I ran, I had $35 million in nasty attack ads run against me. And you know what? It was their constitutional rights to do so. It was their constitutional rights to speak out. And I agree with John Stuart Mill, who said the best cure for bad speech is more speech. And every time you see elected officials trying to restrict speech, it's interesting. The people who are allowed to talk are, number one, the media. You hear a lot of times, well, money's not speech. Well, let's be clear. There is not a person in this room that agrees with that statement. Money absolutely can be speech from day one. You look at the first constitutional amendment the Democrats introduced last year that would have given Congress the authority to prohibit any individual in this room spending any money on political speech. That literally means if Catherine decides she wants to put a yard sign and she goes down to Home Depot and spends $5 buying a piece of cardboard and a stick, Congress could make that a criminal offense. That has never been the case. Money has always been integral to speech. You take something like the Federalist Papers. The beginning of our country, we printed up speech. That takes money. The New York Times spends millions of dollars with giant printing presses. Speaking, I think the answer is not to muzzle citizens, it's to empower citizens across this country, and that diminishes the role of big money when everyone can speak and citizens can speak the loudest.